Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome back to the It's Attainable Real Estate Investing Show, episode 21. Big difference between saving or putting your money in storage or investing and putting your money to work for you. 1 year's difference between investing versus saving is $3,000 and 10 years is $35,000. So you can't solve this problem of not being able to grow your dollars or your wealth by having your money in a savings account by adding more money or more income or allowing more time for it to grow. The disparity or the difference gets worse. So this isn't something you wait on. The time is now. Don't keep putting it off.
Welcome to the It's Attainable Real Estate Investing Show, where you will learn about investing, the power of real estate investing, and how to invest in it. Whether you have the time or even if you don't, you're going to see it's attainable either way. And now your host, who always wants to share knowledge with you, Christopher Balcom.
So in this show, I thought I would share exactly what I've been working on right now. What's that? Finding deals. So what do I mean by finding deals? When I say finding deals, I mean real estate assets that I can invest in that meet the goals of myself and or those who want to invest in real estate like you. I've said it many times throughout the shows, it's important to find opportunities that meet your goals. Everything that is for sale will not meet your goals. So how do you determine what your goals are? Or how do you measure those goals? Well, that goes all the way back to episodes 1 or 2, where we talked about the difference between saving and investing. You remember, saving was when you put your money into what I call storage. You put it somewhere with the expectation to come back and for it to still be there, almost exactly like it was when you left it, and almost the exact amount that you left there. That's typically what happens when you put your money into your savings account. You come back and there might have been a little bit of interest that has accrued, but for the most part, it's the same amount or close to the same amount as what you put there originally. And that's the same no matter if you left it there 1 month, 1 year, 10 years, 20 years. The interest you get on a typical savings account is not a lot. In fact, you might recall that it doesn't even keep up with inflation. So as the cost of your everyday goods and services increase typically about 2% each year, the money you have in your savings account stays the same or slightly increases, but well below the inflation. So the cost of goods and services that you consume go up or increase, and the dollars you have set aside in savings stays the same. That's a problem. Some solve that problem by bringing in more and more income. So your employer may give you a raise each year to hopefully match or exceed the inflation. So at least the income you have coming in increases, hopefully again at the same pace as inflation or better. So if savings is one option, you put your dollars there and you come back and it's about the same. That's why I call it storage. Investing is the other option. So you put your dollars or your money to an investment, and when you come back in 1 year, or 2 years, or 5 years, or however many years, the amount of money has increased well beyond inflation. So if inflation is 2% and your dollars, your money that you've put into the investment have increased by 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 15, 20%, then you are doing very well. That's the difference between saving versus investing. So getting back to the specific topic of this show, finding deals. It's again important to find deals or opportunities that meet your goals. Your goals are whatever you want that return on your investment to be. So when you place your money in the investment and you come back in 1, 5, 7, 10 years, whatever it might be, what do you want the amount of money to have increased to? Nothing's guaranteed, but what do you want the target to be? That's your goal. So how do you get paid this return on investment? How do the dollars you place into the investment increase? So real estate has multiple income opportunities. I won't go into them all in detail. I talk a lot about it in episode 11 and 12. I go into a great amount of detail there. But just briefly, there's cash flow, which is part of the income that comes from tenants making their lease or rental payments. There's equity that becomes available as the real estate asset increases in value, should it increase in value. And that becomes available if you sell the real estate asset, if you sell it, or if you perform a cash out refinance. That equity becomes available to use, ideally to use to reinvest, but you can use it for whatever you wish. Again, episodes 11 and 12 talk a whole lot about the different income opportunities of real estate. So all this goes into your goal. What do you want that return on your investment to be? Usually it's measured in a percent. So you put a certain amount of dollars in, and when you come back, there is ideally a larger amount of dollars present. Let me use a couple of examples so you can understand the power of the return or the power of the percent, and we'll move on. Let's say you put $1,000 into an investment, and you came back 1 year later, and it had increased by $10, so it was $1,010. That is a 1% return on your investment. And let's say it was $50. So you came back a year later and it was $1,050. That is a 5% return on investment. Let's say in a year you came back and it was $1,080. That is an 8% return on investment. Just to kind of show you an example of what the difference is in percents. But those numbers are, they're just okay, right? So we got a grand total of $10 after a year, a grand total of $80 after a year's time. Let's look at what an investment of $50,000 looks like. So the example of 1% really would be not an investment. I would not encourage anyone to invest in anything if the return is 1%. That's closer to what a high yield savings account might provide you. But just for example, a $50,000 investment, or let's say you put $50,000 into a savings account or a high yield savings account that provided you 1%. When you came back in a year, it would be $500 more. So it'd be $50,500. And at 5%, it would be $2,500 more. So $52,500. That's pretty good. And then at 8%, it would be $4,000. So $54,000 instead of $50,000. So the difference in investing in that example, a $50,000 investment, the difference between 8% and 1% is $3,500. That's pretty significant considering in a typical investment, you would not be doing anything. Those dollars would just be sitting there in the investment being used in the investment opportunity, and you would be off doing something else, either continuing to do what you do at your current place of employment or in retirement or whatever it is you want to do outside of trading your time for the dollars that come back in this investment. So by leaving your dollars in a savings account, you would be passing up $3,500 per year. That is the reason why you invest. And the disparity gets larger the larger amount of dollars that you have sitting around in a savings account or in a retirement account that may not be providing the returns you need, or in an investment that may not be providing the returns that you need. And the disparity isn't just in the amount of dollars or money invested, the disparity is also in time. So if 1 year's difference between investing versus saving is $3,000, then 2 years is $7,000, and 10 years is $35,000. So you can't solve this problem of not being able to grow your dollars or your wealth by having your money in a savings account by adding more money or more income or allowing more time for it to grow. So you can see the disparity or the difference gets worse. So this isn't something you wait on. The time is now. Don't keep putting it off. So last example of $100,000. 1%, 1 year later, will provide you $1,000 more than what you had the year before. At 8%, it would provide you $8,000 1 year later than what you had before. So a difference of $7,000. So big difference between saving or putting your money in storage or investing and putting your money to work for you. So with all that in mind, what are your goals? Is it 1%? Is it 5%? Is it 8%? What do you need to do with the dollars that are returned to you from the investment? Would this be for your children's college education? Would it be for your own retirement or something else? So that's why we look for deals, or in this case, real estate assets, to get us there. I started by saying every real estate asset is not a deal because it might not meet your goals. If your goals are 5% or 8%, and you analyze the opportunity or the deal and find that it's only 1%, then that's not going to work for you, or it shouldn't work for you. We talked about how to analyze a deal in episode 13. I showed you a deal analyzer where you input the income and the expenses and the purchase price and etc. for the real estate asset, and it will output a percent, a return on your investment shown as a percent for that real estate asset. So let's find some deals. And keep in mind, it's going to depend on if you're an active investor or a passive investor, if you're going to be the person looking for the actual opportunities or real estate assets that there are to invest in. As an active investor, you will be the person looking for the real estate assets and analyzing the real estate assets. As a passive investor, you may not be the person trying to find the real estate asset or the person caring for or taking care of or managing the real estate asset. You would instead be investing your dollars in a real estate opportunity that might be brought to you. I'm an active investor, and I work with both other active investors and passive investors who might want to invest with me. Either way, and even as a passive investor, it's important to be here and educate yourself on how it all works. Finding a real estate asset to invest in and analyzing the real estate asset to see if it meets your goals, like we talked about in show number 13. You'll want this knowledge for if and when opportunities come to you, or if you seek them out yourself. So when it comes to finding a real estate asset or finding deals that meet your goals, where are you looking? You've got to define a place. So is that a specific state or province, a specific city, town? It's got to be beyond that, all the way down to the town or neighborhood level. Maybe multiple neighborhoods, but all the way down to that specific detail. You'll see why in a minute. What about the type of property? We're going to talk about multifamily property in this show. Apartment buildings or communities are what we call multifamily properties, as opposed to single-family properties or homes. A single-family home would be where one family typically resides. Multifamily being duplex, triplex, quadplex, all the way up to hundreds or thousands of units or families in a community or property. So why multifamily? In brief, it scales. Efficiencies like personnel or maintenance personnel or office or leasing agent personnel. Taking just maintenance personnel as an example, would you find it simpler to manage 50 units or family homes in one building or one community? Or 50 units or 50 family homes in 50 different properties all over town? My answer is I will take the single building, single property, or single community of properties over the multiple properties all over town. Maintenance personnel traveling to so many different places, all of that consumes time, and as the saying goes, time is money. And then capital expenditures. So what about roofs and furnaces and air conditioners? Just taking a roof for example, if you've got 50 properties equaling 50 single-family homes, that's 50 different roofs. If you've got one building housing 50 families or a small amount of buildings housing 50 families at the same premises, that's one roof or a small amount of roofs. Again, more efficiency. So where are we looking? Down to the part of town, the neighborhood. We're looking at multifamily because it scales. There's efficiencies there. So what about how? How do we find the deals? What's the technique? So now that you know where you're looking and you know what you're looking for, that's going to help a lot with the technique. So now that you know where you're looking and you know what you're looking for, that's going to help a lot with the technique. One technique is contacting your agents, your brokers, and your wholesalers. These are people. I've had a couple agents and brokers and a wholesaler on the show. These people, these agents, these brokers, these wholesalers, most of their compensation is tied to commission. And that commission is from buying and selling transactions. So if they're representing you as a buyer, they typically will get a certain percent of the purchase price. And if they're representing the seller, if you're the seller or they're representing the seller in a transaction, they will get a certain percent of the selling price. That can be a really good thing. The interests are aligned. That can really help in reaching a common goal. Your goal as the investor is to find a real estate asset that meets your goals to purchase. And the goal of the agent or the broker or the wholesaler is to find your real estate asset to buy. I said earlier that it's really important to narrow down what you're looking for, where you're looking, because when you have a conversation with these agents, these brokers, these wholesalers, these people in the real estate profession, it helps them out a lot if you say that you're looking for a specific city or town or neighborhood versus just saying, I'm looking for real estate assets or real estate properties in Las Vegas. Well, Las Vegas is a large city. Sure, it's better than saying I'm looking for a real estate asset in Nevada because that's an even larger state or province. But just saying you're looking for an area in a city or a town is not good enough unless you really are looking for any real estate property in a city or town. Because what's going to happen is you tell this real estate professional that you're looking for a real estate asset of any type in a particular city or town, let's just say Las Vegas, Nevada, for example. They're going to send you all the real estate properties that are for sale or come up for sale for that entire city. And that could be great if it was only 2 or 3, but it's probably going to be hundreds or thousands of real estate properties that are for sale, and you may get overwhelmed with looking. But if you can say, I'm looking for a real estate asset in Northeast or the Southwest or a certain area of a town or a certain community or neighborhood, that helps the real estate professional out a lot. And it'll narrow down the amount of real estate properties that you need to analyze and look at. So if I was having a conversation with an agent or a broker or a wholesaler, and you'll come across these people if you're an active investor or become an active investor. As a passive investor, you probably will not because the opportunities will potentially come to you or you may seek them out. But the real estate professionals such as agents or brokers or wholesalers, you may not deal with those people directly. You'll only deal with just the active investor that you will work with. And that's a good thing. It makes it simple for you, keeps it simple for you. Again, as a passive investor, you analyze and review the opportunity that's brought to you, and you decide if you want to invest your dollars in a particular opportunity that meets your goals. And that's it. You sit back and you enjoy the targeted returns. But as an active investor, you will interface with these real estate professionals, and you'll come across different people, either in person at real estate meetings or meetups, as they call them now, online forums or telephone, or otherwise. If you can say, I'm looking for multifamily properties, 50 to 75 units, the southeast part of town X, preferably the ones behind this particular shopping center, that goes a long way in helping the real estate professional find you the right properties, and again, narrowing down the real estate properties that you need to analyze or review. If the real estate professional you're working with is really listening to you, every property you receive should be a potential opportunity for you. Now, you'll have to analyze it and see if it meets the goals of what you want for your return on investment. But besides that, you may have other considerations like the structure of the property. Maybe you prefer brick, or maybe you don't. Maybe you have no preference. Maybe you prefer single-story buildings, or maybe you prefer multi-story buildings. But for the most part, the properties you receive information on should be on par with what you're looking for. So where do these agents, brokers, wholesalers, where do they get all these properties to sell you or show you properties that you might be interested in? Do they own all these properties? No. Well, some do. Some real estate professionals, like these mentioned, agents, brokers, wholesalers, some of them are investors also, so they may have properties that they own that they may wish to sell and can present the information to you on. But for the most part, no. They don't own all these properties that they will give you information on that you can purchase. I'm not an agent or broker or a wholesaler. I'm an investor, so I don't know all of their methods for locating properties that you may want to purchase. But I'll tell you what I know. Real estate is a relationship business. So if I have a property that I want to sell, if I decide to enlist the services of a real estate agent or a real estate brokerage, I'll likely list it with someone I know, an agent or a broker or someone that I have a relationship with already. And that's the same for others. They'll likely list that property with someone they know or someone that someone else knows. Another way that real estate professionals, agents, or brokers will have listings for properties that you want to purchase is by using some of the other techniques we're going to talk about in a moment, most of which are around contacting the owner of the property directly. They find out who the owner of certain properties are, they contact these owners or multiple owners and engage with them on if they want to sell the property. And if they do, they enter into a contract with that particular owner to sell a real estate property or properties. They then list it. What does list it mean? That's going to take us right into my next point, right into our next technique, which is the multiple listing service. Now, this engaging that the real estate professionals perform with the owners, it's not that simple. They don't just contact them and the owner says, okay, I'll sell and I'll go ahead and contract with you to do that, and you'll get a certain percent of the transaction and I'll get the proceeds from the sale, and that's it. It doesn't go that smoothly. Well, sometimes it does, but that's probably in the minority of how things go. Again, it's a relationship business. So many of the listings come from referrals, some may come from advertising, and some may come from directly contacting the owner and establishing a relationship with that owner. So if they don't want to sell now, maybe in the future they'll be interested in selling. And hopefully they'll remember you or that particular real estate professional to contact when the time comes to sell. So what about wholesalers? I was trying to think of the best way to describe a wholesaler. And I'm going to do it like this. You see, I know what they do, but what's the best way to describe it? So I'm going to start with this definition and I'll explain it from there. So whereas a real estate agent or broker enters into a contract with the seller of a property to list the property for sale, a wholesaler enters into a contract with the seller to purchase the property from the seller with the option to assign that contract to someone else to purchase. I'm going to repeat it really quickly so you don't have to rewind. Where a real estate agent enters into a contract with the seller of a property to list their property for sale that potentially anyone could buy, a real estate wholesaler enters into a contract with the seller of a property to buy the property from them with the option to assign that contract or their place in that contract to someone else. Who's the someone else? Well, the someone else is usually never the wholesaler. It's never that person typically. It's you. It's me. It's the investor. A wholesaler typically starts out by trying to understand what their buyers want, what their investors want. Well, investors want deals that meet their goals. We've already talked about that. So the wholesaler develops a list of buyers or investors, sometimes cash buyers. Why cash buyers? At times, wholesalers will concentrate on distressed properties. Well, what's a distressed property? So that's typically a property that has something wrong with it. Maybe it's near foreclosure or it needs a lot of work. Maybe it's to the point where it needs so much work that it's inhabitable. So maybe it has no kitchen or no plumbing or no heating in a region of the country where you have to have heat. Some type of distressed property is what, at times, wholesalers will focus on. And the buyers need to have cash or some form of cash. Maybe it's not cash as in a suitcase of money, or maybe not even cash sitting in your savings account or checking account. But maybe it's a line of credit or a large balance credit card or a partner or a fellow investor who does want to invest. Maybe they're not an active investor, but maybe they're a passive investor. Or maybe they do want to invest, or you do want to invest what's in your savings account or retirement account, or the money has to come from somewhere besides a typical mortgage. A traditional bank who provides traditional mortgages typically will not lend on a property that is inhabitable. So if there's no kitchen or there's no heat, that's too risky for the bank. So the wholesaler concentrates on finding their buyers who ideally have cash or some type of non-mortgage or non-traditional mortgage money who can buy these distressed properties. And if the property is distressed and once it's renovated and rented or whatever you plan to do with the property, keep it for a long-term ongoing investment or sell it or retail it or flip it like you see on TV, then upon renovation, it might meet your goals. It might be a deal. So wholesalers at times will focus on this area. The wholesaler, if you haven't figured it out already, kind of acts like a finder, and they're rewarded a finder's fee. They start by talking with their buyers or their potential cash buyers on what they're interested in, what neighborhoods, what type of property they're looking for, how big, how small, what price. And then they go to work searching high and low for properties that meet that criteria. And when they find one, they enter into a contract with the seller to buy the property with the option to assign their seat at the table or their seat in that contract to someone else to buy the property. So they find the property, they sign the contract, they contact the buyer, the cash buyer who said they were interested, or maybe there's a buyer list. Typically there is a buyer's list or investor list that they will reference, and they'll let the buyer or the buyers on the list know they have this property under contract, and the buyer or investor will raise their hand and review their information and sign the contract, and it's theirs. They go to the closing table and they pay the wholesaler a finder's fee. The finder's fee can be whatever the wholesaler wants it to be, but they have to keep in mind that investors buy deals that meet their goals, or deals that meet their investors' goals. So as long as the finder's fee doesn't upset that, then all is well. So what's the difference? Do you as an investor, are you looking to work with just an agent or a broker or wholesaler? What's the difference between the agent and the wholesaler? Well, from an investor perspective, depending on your goals, it may not matter. To me, it doesn't matter. I'm looking for deals or real estate assets to meet my goals or the goals of my investors, and that's it. I do have specific parts of towns and cities that I'm looking in, specific neighborhoods, communities, and I invest in multifamily properties, so I'm looking for those and specific unit types and criteria, but both agents and wholesalers can bring that. So what is the difference? Well, there's no difference for me. So how does a seller choose between an agent or a wholesaler? It depends on their needs. I mentioned that at times wholesalers will concentrate on distressed properties. So if a seller has a distressed property that is, again, near foreclosure or is inhabitable or is missing major structures such as maybe a poor roof or no kitchen or no plumbing or no furnace, extreme things in that nature, or maybe not so extreme in terms of the property, but maybe the seller is in a distressed situation of some sorts where they really need to sell the property quickly, and maybe they want cash and not want to wait on a bank loan from a buyer. Purchasing through a traditional bank and getting a traditional mortgage can take 60 days, probably at least. And maybe the seller doesn't have that long. Maybe they're in a distressed situation of some sorts outside of the property and they just want to close fast and they want to move on with their life and rid themselves of this property for whatever their reason might be. So in that case, maybe a wholesaler is a good option for them. Not saying that an agent isn't, but that is a wholesaler's specialty, at least many of the ones that I work with. Now, an agent might have a list of buyers also. If an agent is representing investors, or maybe an agent is a residential agent or agent specializing in residential properties, and maybe they have buyers who are looking for a home to live in, or a family wants to move into a home to live in, they may have a list of buyers also. So when a property comes up for sale, or maybe they go and market or try to contact owners in those areas that their buyers want to live in. I've gotten postcards over the last probably 9 months, especially this year in 2020, of real estate agents that want to list the property that I live in. And I think, boy, it must be a hot market if people want to buy the house that I'm living in right now. It's one thing to buy a investment property that maybe someone owns and doesn't necessarily live there. But to buy a house someone's living in, it must be a very hot real estate market. So anyhow, agents may have a list of buyers as well, but typically those buyers will not always be cash buyers. Sometimes they will, but typically, at least the agents I work with in the areas that I invest in, most of the time those buyers are not cash buyers. They have the cash for their down payment, their equity portion they need to provide at closing for the bank to pick up the other 75 or 80 or whatever percent that the bank's going to cover in the mortgage, but they don't have the cash or are not at least using the cash to pay 100% of the purchase price of the property. So I said an agent lists the property. I said that takes us into the next item of, or the next point of, the multiple listing service, or MLS. So the multiple listing service is usually region specific. In the areas I invest in, it is typically state specific. So the multiple listing service may show all of the properties for sale or the transaction details of sold properties for an entire state. When a real estate professional like an agent or broker enters into a contract with the seller to list their property, they enter the property information on the multiple listing service. So they'll have the details of the property there, and they'll have the price that the seller wishes to sell the property for. Once the property is on the multiple listing service, or the MLS for short, everyone, all the agents, and even some of the, I'll say, external platforms like the Zillows and the Trulias and others that you may be accustomed to seeing advertised, or maybe you use yourself, some of those external services will pick up information from the MLS or multiple listing service as well. I don't know that those external services can see everything, but they do at least get some of the information, some of the listing information from the multiple listing service from what I've seen. So this is one technique. The first technique are the real estate professionals themselves, the agents, the brokers, the wholesalers. And then the second technique is using the multiple listing service. Now, typically an agent or a broker will give you access to the multiple listing service. A wholesaler will not. A wholesaler in most places, at least most places here in the U.S., is not a licensed real estate professional, or they don't have to be. I won't say that they are not, but it's not a requirement in most places in the U.S. Now, that's not a bad thing. Do not think that, I can't work with an unlicensed person. You want to work with a qualified professional who can meet your needs. And a wholesaler, some wholesalers can absolutely do that. So don't let the thought that a real estate wholesaler, being an unlicensed real estate professional, is a bad thing. That is absolutely not the case. And you'll miss out on a lot of deals or opportunities if you do follow that thought. All right, so if the MLS or multiple listing service has all of the properties that have been listed with agents, or that agents may have entered on the multiple listing service for sale for the entire state, then why do you need anything else? If the multiple listing service has everything, then why don't you just buy everything from there? Well, there's a few challenges with that. First, I just said that wholesalers, at least wholesalers who are unlicensed real estate professionals, will typically not have the property that they are selling listed on the multiple listing service. So that's one problem, or at least one challenge, with using the multiple listing service as your only source for finding deals. The second challenge is what makes the multiple listing service, or MLS, great, also makes it maybe not so great. At least for an investor who is, again, looking for deals or real estate assets to meet their goals. You see, just like all of the agents may enter the listing for the properties that they want to sell, or they want to sell for their sellers on the multiple listing service, and all the agents in the state also can see the listings that are for sale, and even some of the external platforms like the Zillows and Trulia, from what I've seen, can see some of the listings from the multiple listing service. We've got a whole lot of people looking at these listings. So that's competition. And sometimes competition, added to supply and demand challenges, can increase the price of the real estate property. And that's not a good thing for an investor. Why? Because investors are typically looking for real estate properties that meet their goals. I started the show by saying everything that's for sale is not a deal. And in episode 14, we had a show called Is It a Deal or Is It a Bill? So if you buy a real estate property that is priced too high, or you don't analyze it correctly, then it's not a real estate asset, it's a liability. And liabilities are typically bills that take money out of your pocket instead of putting money in your pocket. So you're not growing wealth, you're losing wealth. And that's not a good thing for anybody. So the MLS is not a bad thing. I have purchased properties from the MLS because it met the goals for myself and my family for return on investment, but it should not be your only source for finding deals. Neither should a real estate agent or broker or wholesaler. Together, each one of these techniques, or in the case of real estate professionals, each person should just be a tool in your toolbox. You won't rely on just one, and at some point, you'll probably use them all. We've talked about just a few techniques today: agents, brokers, wholesalers, and the multiple listing service, or MLS for short. In the next show, we're going to talk about some of those direct-to-owner relationships. We're going to get to the good stuff. I'll share some things that have been successful for me in the past and some techniques I'm using right now. So you don't want to miss the next show. And if you think someone else will find this helpful, remember I said real estate investing is a relationship business. Share the show with them too, and I'll see them and you back here next time on the It's Attainable Real Estate Investing Show. If you have comments or questions about this show, finding deals or techniques, or questions about other shows, you can reach me at neelyrealty.com/engage. That's NILEE realty.com/engage.
You have been listening to the It's Attainable Real Estate Investing Show, sharing transparent knowledge on investing and the powerful impact real estate investing can have on your wealth and lifestyle. Follow or subscribe to the show using your favorite podcast app so you'll know firsthand when a new show is released, or visit neelyrealty.com/podcast and see the show there. That's NILEE realty.com/podcast.